Hello, my name is Anniken and I live in the southwest of England, but I'm originally from Norway. And this shawl that I'm wearing, which I'll be taking off in a minute to show you, is a new shawl that was just released today. So it's called Trethevy. The yarn is a yarn that I actually bought on a recent trip to Norway. So I went to Norway for a month in June, July, and I bought this yarn from the local yarn shop where I grew up. And it's actually a Danish yarn. The yarn is called Holst garn. Garn is yarn in Danish. So Norwegian and Danish are very similar languages, but very different, very similar the way it's written, but very different pronunciation. So Holst garn is a Danish yarn. I tried to this time, and last time I was in Norway, I tried to buy yarns that were not available here in the UK. Because I like knitting with different yarns and trying something new, and I really like this yarn. It's lovely, and I will definitely be trying to get some more of it next time I go to Norway. So today I just want to tell you a little bit about this shawl, and then I also wanted to specifically talk about substituting yarn when it comes to shawls in particular. So I'm going to take this off because it's a little bit hot wearing it. Let me just tell you a little bit about the shawl first, and then we'll go into substituting yarn. So this is knitted from the top down. Oops. So it starts up here with just 9 stitches. I call this a hybrid shawl. So it is kind of a cross between a top down triangular shawl and a top down half hexagon shawl. So the shaping starts like a half hexagon shawl, and then so start with your increasing kind of like for 3 equal sized triangles, and then you stop increasing for the center section about here, and then the center section just goes straight down. So you can see these lines here, and same on this side. You see that? So they're called spine stitches. They have an increase yarn over either side, and that plus the yarn over inside the first 2 and last 2 stitches on every other row is what actually creates this shape. It's inspired by traditional Faroese shawls, but the construction method is actually different. So it's not a Faroese shawl technically, but it is inspired by that. But I find this construction method a lot easier, especially if you're not sure how much yarn you're going to have. So really happy with this shawl. Like I said, I bought the yarn on a recent trip to Norway. I visited my mum's local yarn shop, and I just saw this yarn on the shelf, and I was really interested in it. They had some beautiful colours. So I got 2 balls. I got 1 of each colour, and then I had to go back and get a second ball of the purple colour. And I didn't really know what to make with it, so I just cast on for a shawl, and I'm very, very happy with the result. I will, at the end of this video, I'll put a blocking video. When I blocked this shawl, I recorded it, and then I kind of fast forwarded it. So it's like a speedy blocking video. But I'll add that to the end of this video so you can see how it blocks out. And I'll try and remember to add some photos as well to the end of the video. So let me tell you a little bit about the yarn. And I do have a separate yarn review video coming next week on this yarn, but I'll tell you a little bit about it now because it is important when it comes to substituting yarn. So I'm not going to slip my arms out because it's a bit tiring. So the yarn is called Holst garn tights. Now I don't know whether it's pronounced tights in Danish. It's T-I-D-E-S. So in English you pronounce it tights. I don't know whether in Danish it's pronounced something like tides. In Norwegian it would be pronounced tides, and as Danish and Norwegian is fairly similar, it may be a similar pronunciation in Danish, but I'm not sure. So if you're watching and you are from Denmark, or you're familiar with Holst garn and you know whether I got pronunciation right or not, do tell me. So I've got a bit of a note here, and it keeps, I can't make my piece of paper stand up, it keeps sliding down. Anyway, the yarn is a 4-ply yarn, but actually when I added it to Ravelry this morning, it came up as a 3-ply yarn. I would say it's a thin 4-ply or a 3-ply yarn. It has 287 meters or 314 yards per 50-gram ball. And for this shawl, I used 1 50-gram ball of the pink and 100 grams, so 2 50-gram balls of the purple. So you'd need, I should have added this up before I sat down to record, but you will need, let me just do this quickly, 287 times 3, so you'd need about 860 meters in total. And the yarn is a blend of wool and silk, so it's 70% wool, 30% silk. And these details are important when it comes to choosing a different yarn. So if you live in the UK or somewhere else where you can't get this yarn easily, you'll be able to order it online, and you can order from Denmark without paying, if you're in the UK, you can order from Denmark without paying customs charges until the end of 2020 because of the transition period that the UK is in at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen next year. But at the moment you can still order from Denmark without paying customs charges, because I know that's a big concern when we order from abroad, because customs charges can be quite expensive. The yarn is actually quite affordable. So the yarn is on their website, which I'll put the website link below. On the website you can actually choose between English and Danish. So in the top right hand corner you can choose between English and Danish. And then you can choose between different currencies. So they got obviously euros. I guess the Danish use euros, I think. You've also got things like US dollars and British pounds. So when I clicked the British pounds currency, it came up as £3.28. Excuse me. £3.28 per 50-gram ball. So that's incredibly cheap, I think, anyway. And the in euros is €3.63. So 3.28. So this ball, this shawl costs less than £12 to make. So I think that is very good value for money. Obviously you'd have to pay postage as well, so probably be a little bit more than that, but I still think that's pretty good value for money. And that is because thinner yarns, because you get much better meterage, they do tend to work out better value for money. So let's talk specifically about substituting the yarn for a shawl like this. So the first thing you need to know is the meterage of the yarn used for this shawl. So you need to know the meters per ball size. So for this one, I said it was 287 meters per 50 grams. You can obviously work in yards if you want to, but I'm going to just quote meterage here rather than meters and yards because it gets confusing. If the designer hasn't included how many meters per ball in the pattern, then Google it and see if you can find it on Google. Apologies for my printer making a noise in the background. So this one uses 287 meters per 50-gram ball, and he uses 3 50-gram balls, so that's 861 meters in total. Now I usually allow about 10% safety margin, so I used 50 grams of this pale pink one and 100 grams of the purple one. So for the purple one I probably would have used about 90 grams in total, and for the pink I probably would have used about 45 grams in total. That's sort of give and take a little bit, so don't, now you know that I allow about 10% safety margin, don't think, oh well, I can kind of, I've got 10% less, I'll be okay. You still got to be careful, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You need to also know the tension that I'm using. Now tension is less important when it comes to lace shawls, so I'm not saying that tension doesn't matter. Tension does matter. If you knit a different tension, you may use more yarn or you may use less yarn. And even if you knit at the same tension, you may use slightly more or slightly less yarn than what the pattern says. So tension definitely does matter. But I know that a lot of people, when they knit lace shawls, don't check their tension. because they don't think it matters. So I'm very kind of, if you knit a garment, you must check your tension. I'm a little bit more with shawls, I'm a little bit more, well, check your tension, but if you can't be bothered, fine. But if you don't check your tension, if you knit a different tension, it may affect the size and the amount of yarn used. So the shawl might end up slightly bigger or slightly smaller, and you may use slightly more or slightly less yarn. Having said that, even if you knit the correct tension, you may use a different amount of yarn. Okay, so if I was going to look for a substitute yarn for this, I would look at how many meters I would need in total. Now I use 2 colors, so the pattern tells you that I use 1 pink ball and 2 purple balls. So I'd know that I would need 287 meters of one color and 287 times 2, 574 meters of the second color. And I also know that 287 meters is per 50-gram ball. So the first thing I would do would be to try and look for a yarn that has a similar meterage per ball size. So I would try and aim to look for a ball of yarn that had about 287 meters per 50-gram. So if you can't find that, say you can find one that has 200 meters per 50-gram, that's fine, you can still use that, but it is slightly thicker. So for example, I knitted this on 3.75 millimeter needles. So I would, no I didn't, yes I knitted this on 3.75 millimeter needles. So you might, if I was using a yarn that had 200 meters rather than 287 meters per 50-gram ball, I might choose to go up to 4 millimeter needles. So the first thing I would look for would be the number of meters I would need and make sure I have the right amount in total. So if you wanted to do this in one color, you would just make sure you had, I think it's about 860 meters in total. Secondly, I would look at the yarn content. So this one is 70% wool, 30% silk. So you want to, ideally you would like to see if you can get a yarn that has a similar content. But it may be that you're very sensitive and you've got very sensitive skin and you can't wear wool, but it's too itchy. Even though this is very, very soft, I know for my daughter, this would be too itchy for her. Even the softest of the softest merino wool that I have is too itchy for her. And some people are just very sensitive, or you very sensitive to wool, or you may be very sensitive to alpaca. You might find the slightly fluffiness of alpaca too ticklish. You may not want to use animal fibers, or you may not want to use cotton or silk or whatever. We all have different reasons why we like or don't like certain yarns and why we choose not to knit with them. So the yarn, the fiber content is a guide, and I would say for shawls it matters less. It is useful to know the different properties of different fibers and know how different fibers behave. So silk, for example, tends to stretch out quite nicely and keep its shape better. So if you are knitting with yarn that has silk in it, once you've blocked it, it may keep its shape better. So that's just something to bear in mind, because that might affect the final shawl. But you could knit this in 100% cotton if you wanted to. But check the yarn suggestion, the yarn content, and try and go for something similar, but you can play around with it, especially with lace shawls. I think it matters less. But if you're going to knit it in, say, 100% cotton or 100% silk, it's more likely to be smoother and slippier, and it would drape differently than a yarn that has wool in it. The best thing to learn about how different yarns behave is to knit with as many different yarns as possible. So those are the main things that I would look for. Also, if you have less yarn than you think you would need, with this shawl, it depends on how the shawl is made. So I do have a blog post on my website. So if you go to www.YarnAddict.co.uk and click on tutorials, there is a link there to a blog post. I can't remember exactly what it's called. I will try and remember to link it below. But I basically talk about how easy or not it is to adjust the shape, adjust the size with different shawl shapes. Some shawl shapes is very easy, some it's not. So this shawl shape is very easy. So this one starts with a kind of setup chart at the top, and then you repeat the same chart quite a few times. So the pink is one chart, and then the purple you change to a different chart. So charts B and D, and the middle section is chart A at the top, and then chart C, and then chart E at the bottom, and the sides is chart A at the top, and then this pink bit is chart B, and this bit is chart D, and chart F, I think, for the edging. Anyway, if you buy the pattern, you'll see. But the two main charts, after you've finished the setup chart, the two main charts, the charts that you repeat over and over again, you can repeat those as many times as you like. So if you have more yarn than what the pattern states, and you want a bigger shawl, you can just keep repeating chart B and B or D as many times as you like. If you have a pattern, if you have a pattern that's shaped like this, and the number of rows is the same as the number of stitches in a pattern repeat, so this repeat has 10 rows and 10 stitches, that means that every time I've done 10 rows, I can repeat that chart again as many times as I want. So if this pattern repeat has the same number of rows and the same number of stitches, when it comes to this kind of shaping, you can repeat it as many times as you want. So it's easy to adjust the size to make it smaller or bigger. So if I wanted smaller shawls, I could maybe work one or two few repeats of chart B and chart D. Chart B is here, pink bit, and chart D is here. So, but that doesn't work with all shapes. That's specific to this kind of shape. But there is more in my blog post about that. So what I would do, sometimes it can be difficult to work out how much yarn each repeat will take, and knowing when you need to start the edging and when you need to cast off and that kind of thing. So I'm sure there are very mathematical ways of working this out, but the way I do it, because I don't like to make things too complicated, is what I do is before I start a 10 row repeat, I would weigh the yarn I have, I would knit the 10 rows, weigh the yarn again, make a note of it, then I knit the next 10 rows, weigh the yarn, so I know how much yarn I use for one repeat and how much more yarn the next repeat takes. Because to start with, you increase 6 stitches per every other row, and then after about here, you increase 4 stitches every other row. So each 10 row repeat will take slightly more yarn than the previous one. So what I do is I just weigh the yarn. Once I get like halfway through the shawl, I just start weighing the yarn, and then I use that as a guide to know when to start the edging. And I always allow a little bit of extra, so you don't want to go right to the end, unless you like to live dangerously. So I hope this was helpful. I will try and add the video for the blocking after this video, and I'll put all the links below. The pattern is, if you're watching this in August 2020, the pattern is 40% off until the end of August, and I'll put the discount code and the links to where you can find the pattern below. Thank you very much for watching.